Welcome to another very special edition of Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here at the News Forum where all voices matter. You know, one of the key aspects of Canada's economic recovery will be a healthy tech sector. This includes the financing of Canadian startups, but also new tech and how we incorporate the new technological trends into our economy, including the revolutionary 5G networks. Joining us today to discuss this is Mr. Ray Sharma, founder of Extreme Venture Partners and a tech entrepreneur himself. Ray, thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Tony. Good to see you.
I just want to start off with your sense of what the state of tech is in Canada. Can you give us a brief description of that, please?
Sure. If we break it into private and public markets, on the private side, last year was an all-time record year for private financings, mostly driven by large deals greater than $50 million in size. There was a slight dip in the early part of this year, as to be expected, but if we look at it in a multi-year context, it's been growing tremendously, 50% year over year, and hitting levels never seen before in the Canadian capital markets. On the public side, we have a company in Shopify that is sort of similar to other generational companies that we've seen before. We've seen BlackBerry, and then prior to that, Nortel. Shopify has become the generational company of this current decade, with market values that are put right at the top of the list of the public markets. There are also some small cap stocks that on very small or little to no financials have very aggressive valuations. And so I think that's more of a reflection of the Robin Hood effect of retail investors getting into the stock market, investors that would have been perhaps betting on sports games or going to the casino, and are effectively using the stock market as a casino.
Obviously, that's an interesting trend, but it also means that there might be more capital available for those seeking out angel investors. Is that your take on things too?
Yeah, angel investor activity has been robust. The startup activity in the country has been robust. The startup activity in Toronto is off the charts. The magnitude of Toronto's startup scene is greater than the population difference between it and other metropolitan areas in the country. But really, the biggest trend that's been a multi-year trend is the emergence of these $50 million, $100 million plus financings, call them the mega financings, the mega private financings. They've also served to give private companies an alternative to going public. At the same time, Canada's been innovating for 5+ years now on this concept called the CPC, where a company through a reverse takeover goes public. And you're starting to see that now in the United States being copied as well. So it's an innovation that largely got established here by a lot of our resource companies, and now has spilled over into other sectors like tech.
Interesting. When you look at it from the point of view of COVID, obviously, that's the gorilla in the room. How has all of this been affected by COVID?
Well, before I was at Extreme, I spent 10 years as a public markets analyst. Split my time between an international bank, a bank-owned dealer, and an independent boutique. The last 10 years, I've been in the venture industry. We run 3 funds, have about 110 companies. Been directly involved in founding about 10 to 15 companies or so. And when you look at the implications of COVID, there are a couple of companies that we are invested in or have stakes in that are in the travel-related industry. They've been hurt significantly. Some of them, their revenues have gone to zero. But generally speaking, for all the other companies, business is booming. It's just this same phenomena you're seeing in the public markets, where you're starting to see, where you've been seeing leadership in the big cap tech stocks in the United States on a micro scale. That's happening here with our portfolio at Extreme, where basically this what COVID has resulted in is just an increasing drive towards digitization. And so basically any sort of tech company, generically speaking, has generally been doing well. And the transition to remote working has also been smoother, because a lot of those companies were already set up to have employees work remotely. Shopify, of course, is again another great example. Who they've publicly announced that they'll be, going away from the traditional office building format in 2021. That's something
Maybe
that
hold that
is on the
thought there,
aggressive side.
Ray. We're talking tech here at Boom and Bust. Welcome back as we discuss these issues with Mr. Ray Sharma, founder of Extreme Venture Partners. Ray, I cut you off there, but you were talking a little bit about the changes of COVID and how tech companies are maybe better placed because they were not all invested in expensive office space, as an example.
Yeah, like the generic tech office has an open concept, has a bunch of desks just mushed up together. They're working off their Wi-Fi. They're used to having networking technologies to give them access to all their enterprise applications, and just the nature of the worker makes it such that they've been able to make the transition not only operationally, but then their products are also fit very well for this new world that we've entered into. But like I said, there is a couple of companies where their revenues have been negatively impacted. But I would say over 90% of our companies have actually seen a boom in business.
I'm going to change channels a little bit, and I know I've heard you before talk about the revolution that is going to be 5G networks. Can you walk us through why this is so important and revolutionary to all economies, not just the Canadian economy?
Well, this one I could talk for hours about, so I'll try and keep it short. So the headline is that this is the biggest innovation in mobile since the App Store, and that's saying quite a bit. The subtitles, if you will, are everyone's going to get distracted by the massive increase in speeds because they're going to be profound. You're going to be able to download entire movies within a few seconds. But I think that's a distraction from the more interesting things from my perspective, and those are we're going to start to be able to see 1 billion connections within the city of Toronto, as an example. Before, in the prior version of the internet, IP version 4, there was restrictions in the total number of IP addresses. Those restrictions are no longer going to be there, and you're going to basically see anything that's with a sense that has a sensor to be networked and going to be connected to the internet. Another significant step forward is going to be the ability to really put these devices into fields and let them operate for years on end with very low battery efficient, very low battery requirements. This specification was amazing. I've been 20 years in mobile now, and this one was amazing from my entire experience in mobile and seeing that how much they cared about battery life. And the last thing, which is the most significant, is something called latency. Latency is the difference between cause and effect. The latency in 5G is going to go from 100 milliseconds, which is about the time lag between you hearing my voice and your brain interpreting it, to less than 5 milliseconds. That's a 95% reduction in latency. That's so profound, in fact, that it should cause a lot of software to be reimagined, a lot of user interfaces to be reimagined, and it's going to hopefully open up to a whole new world of applications.
And this all goes into that concept of Internet of Things, where everything is going to be networked. Is that right?
Yeah, that'll be at the very base level, but it's a significant thing. So these can be very simplistic things, like even light bulbs and chairs having sensors. That's what Google Sidewalk Labs was planning on before they pulled out of Toronto. Just to give you some context, the internet grew very rapidly from about 0 to 12 billion network devices worldwide. And then the network started to slow down. The internet started adding about, on average, about 500 million devices per year, mostly smartphones. And because of this Internet of Things thing, we're going to see an acceleration of the total number of devices on the network go from 12 billion to 50 billion within 3 to 4 years. This is across the board. Any type of research you look at would agree with this. It's just a matter of, is it 3 years, is it 4 years, is it 4.5 years? And the significance is there's this thing called Metcalfe's law, where if you have 2 computers, you have 1 network connection. If you have 4 computers, you have 16 network connections. So the number of network connections is going to grow exponentially. The amount of data in the global scene of the internet is going to grow exponentially. So basically, the internet's going to level up as a result of 5G.
We're having an interesting discussion with Mr. Ray Sharma. He is the founder of Extreme Venture Partners. We're talking technology and the upcoming revolution with 5G. We will continue this conversation after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here with Mr. Ray Sharma as we're talking tech. Ray is the founder of Extreme Venture Partners. Ray, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
We're going to keep talking a little bit about 5G because I'd love to know, you've explained how revolutionary it is. So what do you think about the many concerns about Huawei and 5G that have entered the political realm of discussion in many countries around the world?
Well, there's some legitimate concerns. If you ask me the question about the best way to hack, a user 5-10 years ago, I would say to you the best way to hack them is through an application. If you ask me today, what's the best way to hack a user, it would be through one of these Internet of Things connections that are connected to the network. Now, the first thing that people are going to jump to and say that, well, Huawei doesn't provide that aspect of the connection. But actually, Huawei is one of the biggest smartphone suppliers in the world, and they also provide significant parts of the hardware that can do something called deep packet inspection. But just to bring home the point, the largest hack in the history of enterprise hacks was the Sony computer hack, where every email was spilled online, and that was done through a security camera. So the most vulnerable parts of the network in today's day and age, and that was just a few years ago, but it persists to this day and age, is through these network devices that exist on the edge of the network. The Huawei situation, so there's sort of two schools of thought on this, and one aspect is that the packets are encrypted. But on the other hand, there's this thing called metadata, and this is something that Snowden really brought to the forefront, which is data about the data. And I think that's where the real concern is about the possible risks from a supplier like a Huawei, having access to that type of information.
I'm going to switch gears, and recent news was that the market capitalization for Apple has reached or exceeded $2 trillion, which incidentally is about 15 to 20% higher than the value of the Canadian economy in any year. That just shows the breadth and the depth of how tech companies are leading the way. What was your reaction to that number?
Well, I'm drinking coffee out of my Apple mug here that I got from Cupertino. We were lucky to invest in a company that Apple acquired called Locationary. Grant Ritchie was the founder, Canadian, who's doing an excellent job down in Apple headquarters.
A lot of Canadian employees at Apple. That's right.
Yeah, even in their core design team, which is one of their most important groups. They're an amazing company in so many different ways. Their cash position and their the reach of their iPhone. There's so many things, and it was actually the company that I personally predicted and would become the first company to reach $1 trillion in market cap. But it's crazy that it took 40 years to reach 1 trillion in market cap, and then took like 4 months to reach 2 trillion in market cap. I think this goes back to the earlier discussion we had right at the top, Tony, where we were talking about the effect of these Robinhood traders. It's not just the Robinhood traders that are buying Apple. Apple's become, the safe haven for you to buy this whole trend in tech. And it's become, a thing in itself. And is it worth $2 trillion? I put my analyst hat back on, and I think even if you look at some of today's news headlines, you'll see that even some of the most bullish analysts are a little bit skeptical about that $2 trillion handle. at the same time, it's all relative value. It's like sort of when your home goes up in value, or the neighbor sells their home for a tremendous amount, and you say, well, my home's worth a similar amount. And you've got a whole bunch of companies like Amazon, Microsoft, Google leading the way, and Apple on a relative basis has a lot of good qualities to it. But I think, if you look at the valuations on an earnings basis and most reasonable multiples, we're sort of back to where I was when I lived in San Francisco in 1999, and we were in a tech bubble. I think, for me, I don't think there's any question. Are we in a tech bubble? Or are we in a valuation bubble? One of the fundamental issues that when you're in a bubble, you just don't know when it will end until you have the benefit of hindsight. So the tech bubble arguably started in 1996 when Netscape went public and really brought the internet mass market. But it took a full 4.5, 5 years before the tech bubble burst. So does this burst next month? Does it burst in a couple of years? Who knows? But, 2 trillion is a big number and a big expectation to live up to.
We'll continue with our discussion with Mr. Ray Sharma, Talking Tech, here at Boom and Bust after the break. Stay with us. And welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement. With me today as we talk tech is the founder of Extreme Venture Partners, Mr. Ray Sharma. Ray, thank you for joining us today.
Good to be here.
I'm going to ask you to get out your crystal ball and talk about future tech trends. We talked about 5G. That's obviously a huge tech trend. I know you well enough to know that you look to the future. You have ideas about what the future is going to look like. Are there any other trends that our viewers should know about that you've already spotted?
Do you want me to go full Nostradamus? Okay, well, I'll give you a random sample of interesting trends. So look for insurance technology, insurtech companies to lead the next wave of fintech. Fintech got a huge amount of financing over the last few years. It's a very significant innovation sector for the Canadian and all the global economies. The insurance industry has been relatively immune from a lot of the innovative disruption technologies that we always hear about. So look for that. In terms of the application layer, I do think we should see a whole new generation of apps being driven by 5G and this lower latency. Even things like holograms are possible. If you remember Minority Report and Tom Cruise manipulating that image, those images, that's much more reasonable in a low latency network connected to a very powerful cloud. Artificial intelligence, right now, we're in this field called artificial narrow intelligence. We're marching towards, the Turing test, which is this test that says AI is indistinguishable from a human being. You don't know that you're talking to an AI. Look for a tremendous amount of innovation in that area, especially out of Toronto. I've talked a lot of Toronto today, but Toronto is considered the AI capital of the world, with a couple of prominent research institutes and a couple of prominent thought leaders. So the AI so far has been a little bit, very much just machine learning, which is just a fancy learning algorithm. So I think you'll see a next level for AI emerge. And then, there's a couple of important platforms that are out this year, the new PlayStation and new Xbox. So what we're likely going to see is a whole new generation of entertainment applications, i.e. games. So that's a few trends to think about, Tony, and there's always going to be more. And the great thing about technology is it's constantly self-obsolescing. So no matter what the trends are we're talking about today, tomorrow they'll be different.
So judging from that last set of comments, do you think Canada is well placed in the future world of tech?
I'm more bullish on Canada. A lot of people tend to knock Canada's tech sector because we don't have as many mega cap public companies like Shopify. There's very few of them. The one thing that is the truth about Canada is we're a phenomenal R&D location, and so there's a lot of acquisitions of companies in Canada that occur from out of the U.S. and around the world. We have a phenomenal amount of university talent. There's I could go on and on about the colleges and universities in the Greater Toronto area. I've been talking a lot about Toronto because that's 95% of our companies are in the Toronto area. That is our focus. So that plus the SHRED program and a more stable workforce makes it an ideal place for acquisitions. The last time I checked, Google had acquired 6 companies in the Greater Toronto area. There's good reason for that. A lot of the major U.S. companies are looking at locating headquarters up here. Usually they tend to be sales office. Now they're R&D facilities, and it's again a reflection about the talent that we have up here. University of Waterloo is significantly expanding their comp sci program. U of T is the 3rd largest spender of R&D in North America after Stanford and MIT. There's phenomenal stuff going on. Fields Institute is one of the best gems in the city. It's on the foot of University of Toronto. It's literally the Nobel of mathematics, and that's headquartered here in Toronto. Dr. Kumar Murthy runs that organization. Canada's just doing amazing when it comes to technology development. It's just that some of our companies tend to get acquired before they scale into large organizations. To some people, they mind that. To me, I certainly do not. Because of the concept of cradle to grave, the entrepreneurs that say exit a company today, they're the people that will be the angel investors of the company for companies of tomorrow.
I'm afraid our time is up today, but that was a great discussion. Ray Sharma, thank you for joining us today. I hope we can have you back. It's great to have you on Boom and Bust.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
So as you can see, COVID or no COVID, tech is going to be a huge part of Canada's future development in ways that we can barely comprehend. It was great to have that conversation with Ray Sharma. I hope you enjoyed it too. Join us next time for Boom and Bust.